Hello and welcome to Market Insights, and we are coming to you live from the city of Lagos on this beautiful day. I am Lovina Emah. Now on today's show, we are discussing streamlining governance and strategies to cut costs in the Nigerian government. Now, as you know, this topic affects all citizens of this country, and the issue of high governance costs has been a recurring concern in Nigeria, with many calling for reforms to reduce unnecessary expenditures. Nigeria's governance costs have been alarmingly high, with recurrent expenditures consistently exceeding the capital expenditures. Now, this has resulted in reduced investments, infrastructure development, and economic growth. The country's expenditure patterns have raised concerns among stakeholders, prompting the need for effective management systems. Our leaders have often told us, we've heard this a few times, that the citizens of this country need to reduce costs, prioritize your needs, spend wisely to adjust to the high standard of living. But don't you think the government also needs to reduce expenditure to help the citizens? Now, every penny saved by the government can be redirected towards essential services like education, healthcare, infrastructure. And in addition, the government operates more efficiently. It sets a positive example for businesses and individuals alike. Now, to address this challenge, several strategies have been proposed. For example, there was the merged ministries and departments and agencies, and many MDAs with overlapping functions, leading to duplication of responsibilities and wastage. And merging these agencies have been able to help, or they can help eliminate unnecessary costs. And we've seen that with the recent announcement that some certain ministries were being merged. For example, the Ministry of Niger Delta and the Ministry of Sports also. So these ministries have been merged, and a few other ministries, just to help eliminate unnecessary costs. In addition, the review of political offices, making political offices less attractive, can help to also reduce costs. Now, this can be achieved by reviewing the benefits and privileges associated with these offices. We shouldn't make it look like a lucrative business, so that when people come there, they know they are there to serve and not to make money to enrich themselves. Now, another factor to consider also is the provision of adequate infrastructure. Now, investing in basic infrastructure can boost investments and positively impact citizens' lives. And that's what every Nigerian wants. And lastly but not least, the enforcement of monetization policy, discontinuing the provision of houses and vehicles to officers, to public servants whose allowances are already monetized, can also help to reduce costs. And we need to strengthen our judicial system, and promoting transparency can minimize unnecessary litigation and ensure accountability. So this morning, we'll be discussing strategies to cut waste, improve transparency, and promote accountability within government departments. But let's not just be all talk and theory. We're going to hear from experts. We will have two guests who will join us virtually and who will share their experiences on how implementing these reforms will benefit all Nigerians. So whether you are a taxpayer, a business owner, or simply a concerned citizen, this discussion is very relevant to you. So join us after the break as we explore how Nigeria can achieve a more efficient and effective government. Welcome back, and many thanks for watching the program. Now, this morning, to discuss how to streamline governance and strategies to cut costs in the Nigerian government, we have two guests who have joined us virtually. We have Adeniyi Ismail Oluwatosin. He is the founder and CEO of Jomi Global, and he is also a political strategist, an entrepreneur, and a community advocate. His commitment to public service extends far beyond his professional achievements. He's deeply invested in community initiatives that promote youth engagement, leadership, development, and economic empowerment. And we also have Oni Olalekan. He's a public affairs analyst, and he'll be joining us virtually also. So welcome, gentlemen, to the program Market Insights.
Good morning.
Okay.
I'm
Good
pleased
morning.
to be here this
Good
morning.
morning to you. Welcome to the program Market Insights. We're glad to have you here this morning. Have you on the program this morning, even though it's virtually, but we're
Thank
still
you.
happy to have you joining us. So we're discussing streamlining governance, how to create strategies that can cut costs to reduce the cost of governance in Nigeria. Now, before we get right into the issues of governance and everything it entails and how expensive it is, and in case of Nigeria, how it's very expensive and how to reduce costs, let's start with what's the current state of governance costs in Nigeria? What's your assessment so far?
Well, so far, I also agree with the school of thought that talked about how expensive cost of governance has been in Nigeria for years. And, all these associated costs are overblown. Public offices are being run. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
All right. If you look at how our public offices are being run, you will find out that the costs associated with them are overbloated. You will see one public office holder having about 13 or 14 aides. Even some of them have more than this number of aides. For example, if you have a local government chairman, in some places, we've had here where a local government chairman employed over 100 aides. And we know that all of these aides are earning one salary or the other. Apart from that, you look at the retinue of vehicles they have and all of that. So in a nutshell, we can say that our cost of governance in Nigeria is just too high, and it cuts across the local government to the state government to the federal government and even to parastatals, to ministries, to agencies, and all
Okay. This is
of
a
that.
very
And this is why
serious issue
Nigerians are
from everything you have said so far. And definitely, like I mentioned during the introduction, with everything happening in the country, with the high standard of living, the high cost of food items, we're expected. I mean, we're always being told by our leaders that we have to keep readjusting to this current economic situation. But looking at this whole scenario, it shouldn't be the people alone that should be readjusting to the high cost of living. So what are your thoughts on this, on how Nigeria's leaders can adequately reduce the cost of governance, whether it's a local government chairman or a minister or a high-ranking government official? Okay, a bit of an issue with his audio. He'll be joining us shortly. And like you rightfully mentioned, with everything happening in the country, yes, it's cuts across everything in Nigeria, both local governments, state governments, and even in the federal government, we have these high-ranking government officials really living expensively. Okay, can you hear me now, Oni Olalekan?
I can hear you clearly.
To hear. Okay. Okay, so now how does looking at our whole scenario now, like you rightfully mentioned, the cost of governance is in different sectors of our leadership here in Nigeria. But before we talk about other African countries now, I mentioned how since we entered this phase of the harsh economic realities, the high cost of food items, the high standard of living, we're often told by our leaders that we need to readjust so that we can adequately survive during this temporary economic realities. So now how can, don't you think that it's not just the people alone that should be able to readjust? Don't you think the government officials, whether they're local governments or state government officials or ministers, people serving in government, they should also have to readjust and also cut costs? It shouldn't be the people alone. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, that's where I think that's where this conversation is actually going into, you know. So we cannot say that people who are put in charge of government finances should not cut costs as well. In fact, it is much more important for them to even cut costs, even beyond, telling the populace to cut costs at this time, of austerity and all of that. You see, this conversation is not complete without us, analyzing how government officials needs to cut costs. Don't forget that the money put in charge or the money they are spending is even taxpayers' money. It is not even their money. And this money belongs to all Nigerians. So it is very, very important and pertinent that you see government cut costs. And this administration has tried a bit to start that process of cutting costs. If you look at, but I also don't think that they've done enough. But like I said, the process has begun. If you look at what the president said about traveling, to functions, to seminars, and all of that some months ago, he said that if you're traveling, can you hear me clearly, please?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please continue. I can hear you clearly.
All right. If you look at what the president did some months ago about, aides going out or for meetings or for functions, he reduced the presidency and all of that. But we have also argued that it is very, very important that some of these things, goes into these processes also, is associated with the legislative, the judiciary, and every other part of government, not just the presidency alone. Just yesterday, just like you have mentioned, some agencies or ministries were merged together to even cut cost and reduce cost of governance. So it is very, very important that the present administration or the present government ensure that they reduce cost of governance and put all of this money into other things that that will be very, very beneficial to the larger populace. Very important.
Now, some critics are of the opinion that this issue, that is definitely, it's needed for them to run the country effectively, that they need to actually, it has to be this expensive. I do understand what you're saying. But when we compare Nigeria to other African countries, how do you compare the cost of governance with Nigeria and other African countries? And if we have to look at this thing from an opposing view, do you really think at this, what are the primary drivers of this high cost of governance in Nigeria?
Well, first of all, in Nigeria, politics is highly lucrative. And how the politics became lucrative. For example, if you are voted in as a member of House of Representatives, for example, you can see that Senator Oji Uzokalu was saying last week that he earns 14 million naira in a month, and that 14 million naira is not even enough for him. Compare that to what their counterparts in other African countries earn. I doubt if they even earn half of what the Nigerian senator earns in other African countries. So we know that, and with facts, we know that what Nigerian senators or House of Rep members or government officials earn in Nigeria is far higher than what is obtainable in other African countries. Having said that, one of the reasons why I feel that these huge expenses, this huge cost of governance in Nigeria also goes back to the people. If you are in your community and once you get a political office in Nigeria, the cost, the burden the people also put on you are so high that you also want to meet up with the demands of the people. So if you look at this thing vis-a-vis the demands that comes from the people who elected these public officials holders and what they get, we see that, and to an extent, I'm not giving an excuse for Senator Oji Uzokalu, but I understand when he said that even that 14 million naira is not enough for him, at the end of the month. Because if you look at if you look at people who surrounded him back in the senatorial district, the kind of demand that comes to him every day, not even every week, not even every month, the kinds of demand that comes to him every day, you will realize that such money. So we need to balance this conversation. Why I said we need to balance this is that when we say that the cost of governance should be cut in Nigeria, we also need to think of how people put pressure on all of these public office holders, the kind of demands people make from them, the kind of expectations electorates have upon them. It also pushes them to an extent. It pushes them to also want to earn higher and higher figure. So look at, for example, a legislator is a lawmaker. And a legislator is expected to make bills, is expected to make laws and ensure that these bills and laws, affects Nigeria in a positive way. But the expectations on if a legislator, either a state legislator or a federal legislator, is even far beyond just making laws. The expectations on them are that these lawmakers need to bring roads back to their constituency or their senatorial district. These people need to pay hospital bills. They're expected to, build primary health care center and so on and so forth. So all of these demands, all of these bodies puts them in a position where they also want to earn more and more.
I understand what you're saying. Yes, there's the demands from the people in the constituencies that they serve also. But like you rightfully mentioned, it's not a money-making venture. So that also needs to be looked into. So the whole idea of saying, oh, before I got into office, I spent this amount of money. So now I definitely need to recover what I spent. That also needs to be looked at. But that being said, now, how can the Nigerian government balance a cost reduction with effective service delivery?
First of all, we see we are in this regard, in this context, the Nigeria government is in a quagmire. I said this. So I have given instances where we've seen where the presidency or the executive has tried to reduce cost of governance, where it says that if you were traveling now, the president needs to reduce his retinue of aides that follows him abroad or follows him to, if he's going outside Abuja and all of that. That reduced some cost to an extent. Now, having said that, we also need the legislative arm, which is the National Assembly, to also reduce their costs. If the executive has made a law like that or has made a pronouncement like that, that if you are traveling, if you belong to the executive arm of government, either the president, the vice president, the wife of the president, the ministers, and other aides that are or agencies that are under the presidency, needs to cut their cost of governance by reducing the retinue of aides that follows them, maybe abroad or to meetings and all of that. The legislative, which is the National Assembly, also needs to reduce their costs. If you look at the budget of the National Assembly for a year, you will scream. And this budget needs to be cut down. So it needs to be a service-oriented, aspiration. It shouldn't be about we making money, I'm voted into office, I need to build houses, I need to do all of this and all of that. Now let me get back to the foundation of all of this that I know. You may rightly mention the monies politicians spend before getting to the office is always too much. Who do they give all of these monies to? Is it not the electorate? If you go out to campaign, because let me tell you, if the electorate votes for people who they do not collect money from, let me repeat, during campaigns, during elections, if electorates vote, if voters vote for people they do not collect money from, and they voted him in, they can make demands. If the public office holder or the person they voted for do not fulfill their demand, the constitution permits us to wait for 4 years. And after 4 years, you have not done well for us. You have not done what we sent you to do. We will vote you out again. But in a case whereby, politicians spent billions of naira to get into office, what comes to their mind first is how to recoup these monies back. So the way it is now, our electoral process, so that's this see it as a business. I've spent a total amount of money. I've spent 2 billion naira to get into this office. By the time I am leaving, I should be able to have 4 billion or 5 billion naira back. And this is the foundation of the issues that we have. By the time they make that office non-lucrative, and the government, maybe the federal government or the executive, also needs to set these emoluments, these salaries, these wages, and all these allowances right.
Okay, thank you for that, Thank you for that, Oni Olalekan. Now, let's bring it down to our home front right here in our country now. What kind of policies do you think President Tinubu should adopt to reduce the cost of governance in Nigeria, in addition to while also providing relief to Nigerians?
Let's not forget that what the president cannot make a pronouncement, for example, to the legislative or to the National Assembly or to the state government and all of that. The only thing the president can do, what I mean is that there cannot be an executive order, for example, to say that the president cannot make an executive order to say that this is what the National Assembly members should earn. The president cannot make an executive order to say that in states across the federation, this is how much governors' aides should earn, this is how much governors should, because according to the law, all these people are not dependent on the executive. So the only thing I think the president can do is this. For example, people have complained about the vehicles, the retinue of it that belongs to the executive arm of government. The president should lead by example. The way he has done with the traveling of it and all of that, he has reduced. He also needs to reduce how government spendings are being done by the executive first. So by the time you have all of this, by the time the president himself reduces his aids, and you see what was done yesterday by merging ministries together, by merging agencies together, when the president embarks on all of these reforms within the executive arm of government, and also at different times, at several times, advise. That's the only thing the president can do. The president can only advise all other state government functionaries and then the National Assembly, and to say that you see how we have said that the people of Nigeria should also, manage or reduce their cost of living and all of that. Let us also lead by example. So these are the things I feel that the president can do. Lead by example first. After leading by example, reduce convoys, for example, as low as that. Reduce convoys. When it's moving, reduce convoys, reduce aids, reduce allowances, reduce emoluments and all of that. By the time the president is able to do all of these things and tell us that this is how much we'll be saving from the executive arm, talk to the ministers to reduce their convoys, talk to the ministers or heads of agencies to reduce their own costs and allowances, because the president has always told Nigerians to be ready to sacrifice. So it is also time for the president to start sacrificing for Nigerians. By doing all of these things, I believe that the National Assembly, the state governments, the commissioners across the states, and also the state houses of assembly can also follow suit and emulate the president.
Okay, thank you for sharing your thoughts on this, Oni Olalekan. Now, so far we've heard people like you, public affairs analysts like yourself, and others also come out to talk about the cost of governance in Nigeria, how it should be reduced. I mean, this is not the first time we're having this kind of discussion. We've had it on so many other platforms. So, looking at our country's scenario now, do you think the government is somewhat weak, if I'm allowed to say, when it comes to reducing the cost of governance? I want to get your thoughts on this, please.
Well, I think that the present administration, starting the executive arm of the government, the federal government, is working towards that. I've given instances during this conversation this morning how the president has said that if anybody among the executive arm of government is traveling abroad for a meeting, for example, the last hunger, the United Nations General Assembly, and we've seen how the president has traveled with lesser aids after that pronouncement has been made by the president. We've also seen that the president, one of the major reasons why ministries are being merged, which was done yesterday, was to reduce cost of governance. So we have seen that the president is actually listening. I just cited two examples, but I also believe, like I said earlier, that the president can do more. But so far, we have seen that the president is trying to put in place all of these things and make Nigerian money work for Nigeria. So I believe that the president has started this process. It's just remaining for others to emulate him and see to it that one way or the other we reduce the humongous cost of governance.
Okay, well said now. Let's take a quick break now. When we return, we're going to discuss how the government can actually prioritize capital expenditure. So join us after the break. Welcome back, and thank you for watching the program. And we're still discussing streamlining governance and strategies to cut costs to reduce the cost of governance in Nigeria. And to have this discussion with us this morning, we have Oni Olalekan. He's a public affairs analyst, and he has joined us virtually for this discussion. So thank you for joining us this morning, Oni Olalekan.
Thank you too.
Okay, now still on our discussion now, I want to get your thoughts on this now. Capital expenditure. Now, how can the government prioritize capital expenditures?
Well, just like we've been saying, by the time what we've been discussing so far has all been about the current expenditures. Current expenditures, which is about allowances, salaries of government officials, payments of civil servant salaries, maintenance, and all of that. So, so that you're asking about capital expenditure. What we have said so far is that the government needs to reduce the recurrent expenditure, which has to do about what we have mentioned earlier, and then put such money into capital expenditures. Capital expenditures are about providing infrastructures, providing healthcare, providing, basic amenities for Nigerians across the board. Please, also, I want to mention that our focus when we talk about governance, cost of governance, focus should not only be on the federal government. Like I mentioned in my introductory, speech, or I mentioned the local government, I mentioned the state government, and I mentioned the federal government. So it shouldn't be, our focus should not only be on federal government. So when we talk about capital expenditure, what we are saying is that more money needs to be put into the capital expenditure. I have also seen some budgets of some states whereby the capital expenditure is more than the recurrent expenditure. So I think this is what government across all levels should do. Put more money into capital expenditure, whereby, because we know that what affects the populace most is the capital expenditure, the money being spent on infrastructure, money being spent on education, money being spent on healthcare delivery, and so on and so forth. So it's advisable that as the government cuts their cost of governance, the monies should be put on capital expenditure.
Yes, totally. Totally. This is not just the federal government issue. It's across the local government, the state government, and even our members of our ruling houses. That's the Senate House and the House of Representatives also. It's not a federal government issue. So now looking at, we heard now that we've been saving, there have been savings from the PMS subsidy removal. Now, how can we, what would you advise our government? Now, this is not just, it's something that we've all heard about now in terms of using this savings to expand cash transfers and other well-targeted support for citizens of our country. So how can we tap into these savings? I just want to get your thoughts on this.
Well, the IMF advised, I don't know if you have that video of where the IMF vice president was talking about Nigeria cutting the cost of governance, and also spoke about, doing more social welfare programs and putting more money into cash transfers. I also heard or read about the government saying that so far they've been able to save close to 1 trillion naira or more on subsidy, on subsidy payments. So since the government has stopped payment of subsidy, they've saved up to 1 trillion naira, and that this cash transfer has also gone across the state. The Minister of Finance was talking about this cash transfer directly to the most vulnerable set of citizens in Nigeria, and he mentioned the figure and the number of people that has been affected. He also mentioned that about 1 million is about to be rolled out, where monies will be transferred directly to the most vulnerable set of people. So I believe that the savings on subsidy should also go into infrastructure, should also go to the states. And we have also seen that after the subsidy payments have been stopped, we have seen that the monies being sent, the monthly allocation of federal government has increased, the monthly allocation being sent to the states has increased, and the allocation being sent to the local government areas have also increased. All these monies being increased, all these allocations being increased, is expected to reflect in the lives of Nigerians, because when the states collected, and that's why I said that the focus should not only be on the federal government. The state government should also, we should also beam a satellite on the state government and the local government areas across the country. So all these monies, having all this money in the pocket of the state government, in the pocket of the local government, we should see the transformations across our local government areas, across our state government areas, being put judiciously in use by the governors, by the local government chairman, by the federal government, and to transform the lives of Nigeria. Just yesterday or so, the Ondo state government shared, I think, 1.4 billion naira. The Ondo State government shared 1.4 billion naira, for citizens in Ondo State, the elderly, the vulnerables, and what have you. And we also seen all of these things happening in different states across the country. So this is what all of this money should be used for.
Very true. This is what, yes, certainly to benefit the lives of Nigerians. This is definitely what the money should be used for. Now, what are the potential negative consequences of implementing cost-cutting measures too quickly or aggressively?
Well, I feel that I really don't see the negative side of it. I believe that all I see in cutting cost of governance is positives. What I mean is that there will be more money, just like I have said earlier. When you cut the cost of governance, you have more money to put into capital expenditure. Government have more money to touch the lives of Nigerians. Government have more money to do what is expected of them to do. So that's what I see about cutting the cost of governance. It's all positive for me and no negativity.
Okay, now this progress, hopefully we will definitely see more of this being implemented in the coming months or years to come under this current administration. Now, how do we effectively monitor the progress of and evaluate it? How can citizens monitor the progress so far? What's your take on this?
Very, very good question. These are the questions I like because, and what you are talking about is about citizen participation. It's not enough to say that or to hear just to read that the government is earning so amount of money, the government is just spending. There should be citizen participation. Every Nigerian has have the right to ask questions. There are websites online where Nigerians can go to. For example, you can track your local government earnings. For example, to start with, whatever your local government earns, even state governments and even the federal government earnings, you can track it. There's a website called budget.ng, BODGIT.ng, where Nigerians can track the earnings of their state government every month, the monthly allocation. Even on that website, Nigerians can see the projects being done with this money. Outside that, also, Nigerians need to ask questions. Again, I want to say, our focus is always on the federal government. The state government has a whole lot of responsibilities. The local government is the closest tier of government to the people. The local government, wherever you are, is just a walk away distance from where you are. You can ask questions. So these are where I also think that it is very, very important that we have more active citizen participation. Nigerians should be ready to ask their leaders questions. And the leaders must also be very, very ready to answer these questions. Thank God for social media these days, where people can actually call out politely their government, the public office holders, and ask questions. So Nigerians needs to do more of this than even more than just insulting and all of that. When you insult a public office holder and you don't ask questions, they just go take your money out, do whatever they like with your money. But when they see that you are being constructive in asking your questions, in your criticism, you are being constructive, they do not have a choice than to respond to how they have been spending the taxpayers' money. Very important.
Okay. Yes. Now, apart from reducing the cost of governance, which you have mentioned many ways to achieve this now, what can our governments at different levels, not just the federal government alone, the local government, the state government also, what can they do to increase social protection efforts and improve the quality of spending on development priorities and also help Nigerian families with a difficult economic situation?
Well, one of the things Nigerians, we know what is going on in Nigeria presently, the hyperinflation Nigerians are experiencing. I believe that, there are some things that we cannot undo. For example, we have seen what the removal of fuel subsidy, and now that we have a free market for the oil and gas sector, now that we have a fully deregulated sector of the oil and gas, whereby Nigerians are now buying petrol for a higher price, which has actually led to the hyperinflation we are experiencing. Now, state governments, federal government, and the local government has a role to play in ensuring that they are cautioning the effects of this removal of fuel subsidy, which has led to hyperinflation. I told you just now that, for example, the Ondo state government distributed 1.4 billion naira, to hundreds of people yesterday across the state, whereby we have the elderly, the vulnerables, even the youth, whom they were able to help out with some little cash. Other state governments should also take charge. We have seen the initiative of the federal government, the CNG initiative or the presidential initiative of the CNG. What is the impact of that? That will one way reduce the cost of transportation across the metropolis, across the federation, and all of that. I also want to advise that the state government takes up such initiative whereby movements within the state the cost of movement within the state can also be reduced, and many other things. There should be, there should be a good, conducive business environment where people can do businesses easily. And one of the key factors to that is that there should be constant electricity. There should be constant electricity. When you have constant electricity, it is easier for people to do businesses. It is easier for people to carry out their transactions. It is easier for artisans and many other small businesses whereby they won't need to be also be using their full little money to buy fuel and power their generator. When you have light, you can do your work easily and many other things. And one way or the other, when you say you are distributing food palliatives, it should get down to the people. We have heard these complaints over and over again, whereby federal government will say that they have distributed hundreds of thousands of bags of rice, whereby state government will say they have distributed hundreds of thousands of bags of rice. And the people will say that we do not see anything. So if you are doing any palliative, if the government at all levels is doing any palliative, it should get to the people. This is how and what some of the ways to reduce the sufferings of the people, find a way to reduce the cost of transportation. If you are giving out palliatives, you should get to the right people, create a conducive environment for businesses to thrive, provide electricity to the people, and many other things. We've seen what the federal government has done about the student loan. This in one way. As of this morning, as of yesterday, the MD of NL Fund was saying that so far they have given out 10 billion naira from the NEL Fund, that over 350,000 students have benefited from it, and the applications are still on, whereby they want to spend like 90 billion. This has made schooling easy to an extent. We've had stories of, university undergraduates dropping out of school because of fund. But this has become a thing of the past. So do initiatives like this whereby it will make things easy. Provide good health care. Local governments should pay attention to primary health care centers. State governments should pay attention to general hospital, and so on and so forth.
Okay, yes, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Now, briefly, please, in just a few words, can you just tell us, we know this is not going to be a very easy thing for our governments at different levels to achieve. So now, how can the government overcome resistance from within its own ranks to these reforms?
Come again, please.
Now, I said, how can the government overcome resistance from within its own ranks? That's within federal government officials, state government officials, and even local government officials, to these reforms concerning the cutting down the cost of governance?
Well, what should be the resistance be? My own advice is that the government officials should pay attention to it. Don't forget, going into public office is not for money making. It should be for service. So whatever resistance they are having should be taken by them. You are going into office to serve the people and not to make money. So whatever resistance should be accepted by them, or what I mean is that they should pay attention to this. You are not in the office to make money. You are in the office to service the people and to serve the people. That's my point.
Much, Oni Olalekan, for sharing your thoughts on this issue and also offering lots of changes on how our federal government, state governments and local governments can reduce the cost of governance and also help citizens of this country greatly. It was really great having this discussion with you, and we look forward again to having you on Market Insights. Thank you. Now let's look at the money markets this morning, how they're looking at the selling rates at the Central Bank of Nigeria rates and the parallel market rates. So for today, Thursday, 24th October, the dollars are currently selling at 1,676 Naira to $1. That's the CBN rate. And for the parallel market rate, is selling at 1,750 Naira to $1. For the pound sterling at the CBN rate, is selling at 2,202 Naira to £1 sterling. At the parallel market, it is selling at 2,250 Naira to £1 sterling. For the euro, at the CBN rate, it's selling at 1,841 Naira to €1. At the parallel market rate, it is selling at 1,860 Naira to €1. So those are our money market figures this morning. Thank you so much for watching the program Market Insights, as we shared how to cut down the cost of governance in Nigeria, not just at the federal level, but also the state government and the local government level. I also want to thank our guest, Oni Olalekan, for sharing his insights into this discussion. Many thanks for watching the program. Do share your comments and likes on our social media platforms. Thank you for watching the program. I am your host, Lovina Emah. Do stay tuned to the news updates on SOUQ News Television.